Okay, hello and welcome. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Sanpera, CEO and co-founder at Sateliot, and Stephen Douglas, head of 5G strategy at Spirent, and also an advisor to the UK government on 5G security and a member of the Internet of Things community. You guys want to say a couple of things about yourselves before I jump in with questions? Mr. Sanpera, why don't you start?
Thank you, Solon. I'm Jaume Sanpera. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Sateliot. I have been an entrepreneur all my life, starting companies on the telecommunications industry. And now the last one is Sateliot, which is a satellite constellation for the IoT devices of the world. We are connecting all the 5G IoT devices of the world directly from space, which changed completely the setup of the industry, as we will explain later.
Okay. Mr. Douglas?
Thank you, Solon. Yes, hi, I'm Steve Douglas. I head up 5G and market strategy with Spirent Communications, the test, measurement and assurance vendor for the communications sector. And I've been in the industry for over 25 years and focusing mostly on disruptive and innovative technologies that are driving sort of the cellular and mobile communication industry forward. And currently my focus, Spirent's focus is very much on helping test and assure and accelerate major 5G deployments across the globe. And we're engaged in over 1,800 engagements with service providers, to device manufacturers, right across that ecosystem. And especially as that ecosystem intersects, I would say, with enterprise and industry, and we start to see a move from just consumer technology right across into the industrial and enterprise space. And I help not only with our strategy, but I also work with a number of government and industry boards as an advisory member.
Right, okay. Let me start by asking you then, working across many different fields, private sector and government, the last couple of years have been both an emotional and economic roller coaster. With the pandemic, gloom and doom everywhere, and then recovery, and then the war again, and so markets, consumer confidence, people's feelings have been all over the place. How do you think that has affected how we connect, how we exchange information?
I think it's very interesting because it's one of the areas I would say has been a silver lining through this sort of last terrible few years, in that it's probably accelerated a movement in terms of an adoption of communication technology to help us not only better collaborate, which I would say was probably the first wave that, we had a lot of people moving to become remote workforce, work from home. How could they do that? How could they collaborate when they're not in an office or in a factory environment? And we started to see this evolution of the tool sets and capabilities and the communication technologies that would be required to do that. And a secondary big part of that, I think, was really security. Obviously, a lot of industry and businesses, to enable that type of remote workforce, we're looking very much, how do you do that in a secure way? Not only is it about providing them the connectivity, but giving them access, which is secure. They can get access to back-end systems without compromising business policy. And I think we saw sort of a huge evolution on new security capabilities, not only on the communications infrastructure and networks, but on the end-to-end systems as well. And I would say the last area, which I find probably the most exciting, is that we've also seen the acceleration of automation technologies. This realization that it's not just about giving people access to systems. How can we actually enable them to do some of those tasks remotely? How can we actually automate things in our factory environments, things in our workplaces where a remote user can actually not only access them, but control them? And we've certainly seen in the last 18 months a huge investment across a lot of industry and enterprises to bring in automation technologies that can be used. And if you'd asked me a number of years ago, this was something we probably anticipated in, the second half of this decade. and now we're starting to see it already. So I think, I don't want to downplay the negative impact that, what's happened to us in the last few years, but if there has been some silver linings, I think we really have created a better connectivity and collaboration environment, and with automation technologies now starting to come to the fore.
Mr. Sanpera?
I fully agree with my colleague Stefan. There has been a jump in the future. Things that would take usually 5 to 10 years has happened in just 3. But at the same time, I'm really worried about this rise of the remote working. Okay, I really believe, that there is a lot of richness that we are losing with the distance. Without the personal contact, a lot of small interactions that finally creates a lot of value have disappeared. Then I will bet for going back to travel, going back to personal meetings, and people go back to work, in a high percentage of the time. Okay, I really believe I am a technology enthusiast. I have been using Zoom. My first company that I set up, it was in 1995. It was a video conferencing engineering company. Okay, this was really very far away. Then I really believe that these technologies are very, very useful. Okay, but at the same time, we don't have to lose the day-to-day work together where things are created in a non-structured environment.
Interesting. So, Mr. Douglas, we've been moving forward by leaps and bounds, but do you agree with Mr. Sanpera? Is the office coming back?
I definitely think it is coming back. We are seeing that sort of hybrid environment with a lot of, our end customers are certainly willing to have, this combination of work from home or come into the office. I think it's one of the challenges though with it. We're seeing at this early stages. I call it the twilight zone of virtual physical, where you can't really yet depend that a meeting is definitely going to happen physically, because somebody might test positive with COVID. Events can get cancelled last minute. Travel gets disrupted. But what I think that is leading us to is to actually look back at the technology and say, okay, if we are going to have this hybrid environment, this office work from home, and we can't sort of guarantee it at this stage that it's where the meetings or where the events are going to happen. If we have a tool set which is available and flexible, and provide that connectivity, then we can adapt very last minute to that. And I think we're starting to see sort of that evolution. I mean, we're a long way forward. I talk about connectivity. Connectivity is certainly improved, but it's nowhere, it's not ubiquitous. It's great in an inner city of like London where I live, but if I go rural, it's not that good. And if I'm working from home rural, I may be dependent on potentially legacy technology, or hoping that I may get some potentially even satellite coverage, and those are some of the challenges I think as an industry going forward we need to look at.
Interesting. Mr. Sanpera, day-to-day challenges that you're facing?
Which challenges are we facing? There are several challenges, in this near future. In the way, that the people works. Of course, there is a challenge with all these young people, that all these young technical people that wants to work from home, making them come into the office. That's not easy, but I really believe, that the huge challenge for the industry is to attract talent in this moment. After the pandemic and all these things that has happened these last years, have changed the values of the people, of the scale of the values. Before the pandemic, work was much higher. Today, people need to have something more than just a job, just a place to work. They want to be part of something that have a soul, part of something that have a real mission on this life. further than just bring money from the shareholder, which of course is always important, it's always super important, okay, for the sustainability of the company. And this is something that we are addressing. We really believe that in our company we are here to change the world in our small part, okay. But this is the only way, okay, that you have the best people with you. Okay, and this is a challenge for the new area that has to come.
Okay, what are the latest innovations, the innovations that you think are changing the industry or shaping the industry that you are implementing, Mr. Douglas?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's quite a number of them. I would say probably the big sort of intersection, I would say, specifically in our industry, is probably around cloudification. Not only is our end customers, the large communication service providers, starting to become more and more dependent on the cloud in terms of how networks are built, how they scale, how they become flexible. I think the whole ecosystem around that is also starting to look to see how it can benefit from it as well. And our industry is no different as a test and assurance supplier within that. Is how do we exploit and benefit from a public-private cloud environments where we can actually benefit from its distribution globally, its scalability, its flexibility. I think the other key area really for us is fundamentally around security. A big part of our business is not only testing systems for their, say, performance or conformance, but our devices, our networks, are they secure, and testing that. And I think a big part of that is work that we look at today is that the security landscape is changing so I would say radically at the moment. It's the attack vectors are broader than we've ever seen before, and that changes a bit of the mindset in terms of what you need to start thinking about security. It's no longer good enough to think of building a perimeter and trying to hopefully people won't get in. We're starting to think more and more in terms of not only zero trust types of architectures which can be used, but proactive security, a willingness to attack yourself, to learn what your own weaknesses are so that you can put in the most relevant mitigations. And obviously, most people don't think that way today. We tend to, we'll go out and we'll buy security gateways or firewalls, and we hope that they'll do their job, but we don't ever take the time to go back and say, are they still fit for purpose? So a large focus of what we're looking at the moment is also testing the security efficacy all the time, not only of our solutions that we bring to our customers, but also of our own systems as well, to make sure that we can stay ahead of the curve and that we can put in those resilience and mitigation measures in place. And I think those are probably some of the big innovative areas we've been focusing on over the last 18 months.
Interesting. Mr. Sanpera, is Sateliot as focused on security, or what are the key innovations that you are putting into the market?
Of course, with all the things that has happened this last year, security is always a must. It's something that you have to have it from scratch, okay? And the innovations that we are facing and some disruptive innovation in the industry. As you know, okay, we are deploying satellite constellation that will cover all the world using exactly the same technology that today the mobile operators are using. This is a complete disruptive way to go for a problem that has been in the satellite industry for its whole history. Okay, since today, satellite industry has been working in proprietary with proprietary equipment. That means they have no economies of scale. Therefore, they are very expensive. If you want to connect something in the middle of the ocean, boat, logistic container, or you just want to follow a whale, okay, the cost of these devices are some hundreds of euros. This means, okay, that you could do it just in very special ways, in very special items, okay, that you need to control. What we are doing, we have taken the standard of the industry, which is the NB-IoT or 5G IoT, And we are using exactly the same devices that connects direct to satellite with our low Earth orbit constellation. The change is huge. We are going from equipment that cost some hundreds of euros to equipment that cost less than 10 euros. This means, okay, that we are going from that we are going from an industry, okay, that it's just for very special cases to the massive IoT in a worldwide base. In very few time, okay, you will have the capability of connect with a device that costs $5 and $1 a month, anything in any place of the world.
Okay, you're talking about changes of orders of magnitude here. This is some pretty amazing development. Can you perhaps explain to us 5G technology? What is the impact of 5G technology in our daily lives? I'm not a tech guy, so start from the beginning.
Okay, 5G have several aspects, okay? The most well-known of 5G is higher speed on your mobile phone. This is something that it's happening and it's going to happen more in the future. But at this moment, okay, well, we do not believe that is as disruptive as the 5G IoT technology. 5G IoT means to connect millions of things in any place, okay? Today, the problem with 5G IoT is that the coverage of the mobile operators is just 10% of the world. There is 90% of the world where you don't have mobile coverage. This means that there are a lot of sectors, like agriculture, that could not be impacted by 5G IoT technologies. We have seen the initial impact of all these inside the cities, where you have for day-to-day, okay, more things connected to the network. And when you connect something, means that you could monitorize and you could change. Then what we are doing is taking this device, okay, and building up satellites that could connect with exactly the same device with no additional antenna, no additional power, okay. This means, okay, that you could extend this monitorization of the world, day-to-day world, to the other 90% that today is not connected.
Okay, Mr. Douglas, you are very active in IoT and thinking about IoT. Are you on the same page there about the 5G impact?
I would agree. I mean, 5G is still in its infancy. You know, we are at the very still early stages of a 10-year technology. You know, you just heard there's less than 10% coverage. I think 5G is probably less than 1% coverage today globally in terms of its deployment. So it's still a long way to go, but I do think it's potential to be transformed. What I would say is that we tend to always think of 5G as a terrestrial technology, but you've just heard that it doesn't have to be. It can be part of what we would call a network of networks, where it can be delivered across non-terrestrial mechanisms as well. And that starts to create opportunities to create that sort of ubiquity of coverage across the globe. And, you know, you're really going to see sort of, I would say, two sides to 5G in terms of its transformative effects. You're going to have what you and I will explicitly probably see. And in many cases, this will be more related to the higher, the throughputs and the speeds. You know, we're already starting to see new types of gaming applications which are being consumed in some of the early adopter markets. We're starting to see more and more early augmented reality types of applications being powered by 5G starting to be used. Initially, again, it's more for entertainment purposes, but there's a huge potential combining that with industrial IoT for things like remote maintenance and management in enterprise environments. I think the other side of it, though, is where it implicitly can help us. You know, we mightn't explicitly know what's happening. And I think this is where it sort of broaches into those enterprises and industries. And, you know, our cities and transportation systems are going to gradually be evolving to start to use more and more of 5G IoT technology for smart transportation, for the way we implement autonomous driving in the future. You're already, as I said, seeing our manufacturing environment starting to look at how they would adopt it to become not only more agile, but efficient and environmentally friendly. And even, you know, as my colleague here said, our agricultural sector, you know, is looking to respond to the challenges of sustainability in the midst of population growth and climate change by looking at how it can exploit communication technologies like 5G, like IoT, being delivered not only terrestrial but non-terrestrial, to implement things like precision farming, where we can actually meet that sustainability challenge. So I think, you know, in the short term, you know, we're still very much in its infancy in many of these technologies, especially 5G. But I think the potential there, both explicitly for us and implicitly, is going to be huge for our, you know, for lots of industries over the next 10 years.
Okay. Is there any downside that you see to this?
Of course, there's always a downside. There are certain risks. There's risks about lack of adoption. You know, people are obviously, there's a huge financial investment that has to go into rolling out these technologies. You know, the industry as a whole has spent billions of dollars already in terms of getting access to spectrum licenses from regulators to build out network infrastructure. And that cost has to be recouped. And that sometimes can put pressure on the industry in terms of the types of innovation and applications it tries to bring to market. It's also heavily dependent on an ecosystem approach for the first time. It's not about simply selling consumer handsets for you and I to make voice calls or watch videos. It's about convincing big enterprises, industries, governments that technology like 5G combined with IoT could be exceptionally valuable for their businesses, for gross domestic product. Because if they don't adopt it, then in essence, you know, 5G will just be a faster generation of 4G and 3G before that, and we'll not see some of those huge benefits. I think the last area I would highlight is just would be probably its environmental credentials. You know, 5G's got a huge opportunity to potentially enable great environmental outcomes in other industries, but at the same time, you know, we're going to be deploying a lot of more cell sites. We're going to be utilizing huge data centers for the movement of large volumes of data across the networks. We are going to be instrumenting millions, if not billions, of things through massive IoT. And all of these things require power, energy. And if we don't understand the efficiencies that we need to make it sustainable, then there is a risk that, you know, 5G and broader IoT may not be as green or as sustainably friendly as we want it to be. And thankfully, there's a lot of work and focus around that at the moment. But, you know, those are some of the, you know, the challenges that, you know, the industry is looking at today.
It's a very interesting topic you open up there. Mr. Sanpera, what are the downsides to 5G that you see? Can it be made to go green?
We really believe on that, okay? Our slogan of the company is because a connected world is a better world. This means that we want, and we really believe that we will change the world to a greener world. The natural resources are very scarce, and the only way to have a sustainable economy is to measure those resources. And today there is a huge complication. You have to think that in cities like Barcelona, the water is just controlled on the enter of the two rivers that arrive to Barcelona. The water is just controlled at two different points of the entrance of this water. Okay, if you could control all these upwards, okay, this means, okay, that all this sustainability will be not just on the city but outside on the greener spaces. Okay, if we talk about agriculture, the first pilots that we have a startup reflects, okay, that 40% of the water could be saved measuring the humidity of the soil, 30% of the fertilizers. In cattle management, okay, there are huge savings also, but in the care of the natural resources, these are something that we are really focused on. There are several companies today, okay, that are focused on following, for example, the endangered species. We have to think, okay, that when you deploy satellite to your constellation, you have global coverage, but at the same time you have homogeneous capacity. This means, okay, that in countries like Ethiopia, we'll have 4 times more capacity than in California. And of course, there are not the same amount of business in Ethiopia than in California. We'll have a lot of capacity that will not be used in these places where a lot of things maybe change monitoring. We are already offering non-profit organization the monitoring of these engaged species for free. And this is something that it will have really a huge impact on these underdeveloped countries where we want, that thing change through the control, through the monitoring of these natural resources that today, or the Amazons, the thing on the Amazons, all this that is happening in Amazonia, could be the first step to change it is to monetize it. It's to know what's happening. Today, this is not happening because it's impossible, because there are no telecommunications. Brazil is a country that 70% of the country, it's Amazonia, and there is no any way to control what's happening there. All these over size capacity that we will have on these places is the one that we are offering. We're offering right now, and we're offering through this through your forum, to this non-profit organization in order to really have a better world through connectivity.
Okay, interesting. And some practical aspects there that we can understand. Now, you both talk about 5G being in its infancy, and we start to hear already about 6G. How is that developing?
We are very far away from 6G, we are the 5G new radio, it's still in its infancy, there are some aspects that still have to be the standard have to be finalized. Then this means that we have 5G for a lot of years. It's important to start working on the next generation, but we are 10 years away from 6G on my view.
Douglas, what do you think? Within our working lives?
Yeah, no. To be honest, this isn't anything really new. I mean, if you look back at 5G, it took a 10-year cycle from vision forming through to the standard setting to the first commercial, deployments that we're starting to see now. So 6G being on its 10-year journey is I would say is pretty standard, and it is at that very early vision forming stage, and so a lot of the concepts are concepts that are already being talked about, and potentially what the latter stages of 5G could enable. So some of the early thoughts around 6G that are being explored in terms of the vision forming stage are, could we combine the physical and digital worlds now with the biological world, is a big area. So we're really looking into the realms of holographic, tactile, and physiological communication. So we can now look to transmit sensory inputs like touch and feel as we do today with voice and vision. And that would potentially enable a new range of sort of machine type interactions of the future. And some of that may creep into the 5G system in its later stages. And, one of what I think is the most probably important parts of the discussions with the 6G system is something that's already started in 5G is looking at it as something called a network of networks. Where potentially this might be the last G, because the reality is it's looking at how do we combine all of the other connectivity options that are out there to provide a more ubiquitous connectivity globally, rather than having lots of silos. Because at the end of the day, the biggest challenge communications providers have always had is really solving the challenge of consistency and coverage. I mean, I know that sounds very, very dull, but at the end of the day, if you don't have coverage, you create digital divides. And if you don't have consistency of maybe the speeds or the latencies being provided by the networks where they maybe fluctuate, then many of the innovations and the applications actually can't be delivered. So having a network which is built out of multiple loosely federated networks, whether it's non-terrestrial low Earth orbit networks, whether it's subsea networks, whether it's even Wi-Fi convergence with cellular, becomes a bit of a holy grail. You and I, the end user, wouldn't even need to know what network's delivering our service as long as it was consistent and we had good coverage. And I think that's a huge ambition with 5G, because it is really trying to think about how do I break the digital divide and create ubiquitous, good consistent coverage globally. And I think that's a pretty high bar it's going after. But I think it's a good ambition to have.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking as you were saying, I quite like the idea of technology becoming dull is when you know that it's well established. Um, yeah, you don't think much about switching the lights on. It's dull, which means, we got this. But talk to me a little bit about the mundane elements of finance for this. So the way it looks is you're going to spend hundreds of billions of dollars over a decade putting in 5G, only to start ripping it out after that to put in 6G.
I wouldn't say you're going to rip it. I mean, the whole idea of a lot of these technologies now is to design them in a way that they not only are backward compatible, but forward compatible in terms of evolving into it. And that's why I say you'll probably see the 5G system in its second half of this decade start to introduce some of the foundational capabilities, which will become 6G. You're already things like satellite technology is already now being brought into the standards for 5G. And that's, I think, a positive step. And I think you'll see more of that. The financial side is always going to be difficult because these are huge sunk investments. The more 4G investment is going to take another 10 years for many service providers to really see a return on investment against that, and yet they're spending billions today on 5G. 6G very similar. I think what's quite interesting, though, with 6G at the moment, and this is something we've never seen before, is just the amount of government money being put into it in this early infancy stage. When 6G, is purely at this vision forming stage, and yet we have a number of governments who've already allocated billions of dollars of research funding towards it. I think why that's interesting is because we're starting to see this realization. It started in 5G, of how 5G and IoT are going to be fundamental for the future digital economies, for the gross domestic product of many countries going forward. And leadership in many of these fields is seen as critically important. And I think you are starting to see a little bit of I don't like to call it an arms race, but it probably is with some countries to take that leadership. And 6G already, we're seeing, as I said, billions of dollars from many countries already earmarked for major research programs, which is great if you're in academia and you're in those research programs. There's a lot of money out there at the moment. So I think that's, from a technology perspective, I think that's exceptionally positive.
Mr. Sanpera, if we're going to gaze maybe 20 or more years out into the future, what does IoT look like? What does Web3? What does the industry look like?
One of the things that is coming to the new industry is the standards. Okay, 5G for first time has extended a terrestrial standard to the satellite industry, to what is called non-terrestrial networks. This changed completely the way the industry will evolve. Since today, all the deployments will have been terrestrial deployments, and there have been a lot of pressure because connectivity means development, to extend the terrestrial coverage to places where there is no investment return. With the new satellites, the new low Earth satellites, we have to remember, that since 10 years ago, all the satellites were launched at 30,000 kilometers of distance from Earth. The new satellites flights much more close to Earth, around 500 kilometers. And this means, that you could connect much more things directly, and you have much more capacity than ever before. This changed completely the way you deploy the networks. The 4G has been fully terrestrial network. The 5G will be hybrid. And the 6G is already being burned, in an hybrid mode. You have the terrestrial network as always, which is the best in terms of capacity. Then you have something like hubs, high altitude vehicles that will cover outside of the cities. Then you have the low Earth orbit satellites that will give you coverage in the rest of the world. The hybridization of these networks between terrestrial and non-terrestrial is something that we'll see. and this excuse, okay, that I had no coverage, okay, will disappear. In very few years, okay, you will see, okay, that the coverage will be 100% universal.
Okay, well, that's definitely having some implications for the tourism industry. I can think sitting in Greece at the moment. Mr. Douglas, what do you think? Future gazing 20 years out?
Yeah, 20 years. That's. I think, I mean, where we're starting to see that evolution sort of with Web 3.0 and the metaverse, assuming that sort of gradually evolves as a lot of people think it might do, I think we enter sort of a really interesting world where a lot of technologies suddenly become both enablers and applications of the same environment. And I think that's fundamentally game changing. Because what I mean by that, if you take something like, say, 5G or 6G communication technologies, number one, of course, they're going to be useful to enable things like Web 3.0 and the metaverse through incredibly high speeds and low latency. But at the same time, they could turn out just to be another application within the metaverse. Another decentralized and virtualized component providing communication across the various intersecting digital worlds where people were going to start to, be part of. Yeah, where communication itself, access and how we pay for it may even change to mechanisms like trust and NFTs. I think you're going to see potentially more and more of that. This really combining of the digital and physical world together. In essence, where we create, multiple digital twins of environments. Not only for our entertainment purposes, but how we even operate our businesses and our industries. And the one that probably excites me the most, or I think is something we definitely will see, and we saw early signs of this in the pandemic, was how do we then incorporate the biological world into this as well? How do we look at potentially enabling connectivity of the body? Whether it's intelligent skin sensors that can communicate how our body's health information, right through to our own personal body area networks as well, which is something that's being looked at the moment as well, where we create our own, in essence, network, which could connect into a broader set of networks. And I think this becomes exceptionally interesting. As I said, we saw some of this in the pandemic. How do we deal with an environment where we need to monitor and treat people, where we potentially are putting nurses or doctors at risk and being in the same environment? And if we can create systems where the body itself is its own communication device, and provide accurate information all the time, I think that becomes incredibly powerful as a new way of communicating. So I think you're going to see more of that, this combination, of that sort of physical, virtual, and biological world starting to come together. And the metaverse will be more than just a virtual environment. It may also have that physical, biological element to it as well. But I think we're still maybe 20 years away from that in some regards. And I really don't want another pandemic to accelerate it.
Yeah, I don't think anyone does. But let me just remind our audience that you can find this and share your thoughts and any questions on the social media using the Webit hashtag. And let me turn to Mr. Sanpera for any new trends that we should be looking out for, anything I haven't touched upon that you'd like to add.
I think that the trend that is super important is that we have to be really aware that we are the last generation that we could change the trend toward the sustainability and the environment of the earth. Okay, we have to really take care of that. Okay, that it will be no more opportunity to change the world if we don't do it by ourselves. Then the new companies have to have the both objective, but at the same level, profitability and environmental and sustainability. This is something that it's a must for the generation of entrepreneurs and for the generation of managers of the companies, that if you want to survive as a humankind in our Mother Earth.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Anything you think I missed?
I think you covered. I think the last statement was right on the money. I think sustainability and energy are going to be the most dominant trend in the next few years. We're seeing this with young people today. Their understanding of it, the understanding of the risk to them, will drive all industries to focus more on it. And those industries which can really demonstrate in a transparent way how they're dealing with sustainability, how they are becoming energy efficient, will be the real winners. That's where young people will engage, will spend their money, will embrace. And I think it's in our interest, in all our interests, to focus on that, because I think that's really where the future is.
Well, thank you both very much then. And I'd like to close this panel and turn over to Webit so they can move on to the next. Thank you both.